The slap echoed through the marble kitchen like a gunshot. 6-year-old Emma stumbled backward, her small body hitting the counter hard. Her stepmother Miranda stood over her face, twisted with rage, hand still raised. "Stupid girl! How many times do I have to tell you?" Outside the window, a gardener in worn boots and a faded cap froze mid-motion. His weathered hands gripped the pruning shears until his knuckles turned white. No one knew this gardener was Alexander Thornton, the billionaire who owned this mansion. The man who had built this house for his children. The father who was watching his worst nightmare unfold. But what he would discover next would change everything. Before we continue, drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Alexander Thornton had shaken hands with presidents. He had closed billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat. He had built a tech empire from nothing but a garage and a dream. But nothing had prepared him for this. He stood in the garden of his own mansion, dressed in clothes he had bought from a thrift store 3 days ago. Dirt caked under his fingernails. A fake beard itched against his jaw. And through the kitchen window, he watched his new wife grab his daughter by the arm, hard enough to leave bruises. "I tried," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible through the glass. "I tried to set the table right." "Tried," Miranda laughed, sharp and cruel. "You call this trying? The fork goes on the left, not the right. A 5-year-old could do better." "I'm 6. The words slipped out before Emma could stop them. Alexander saw the exact moment she realized her mistake. Her small body went rigid, her eyes widened with fear. Miranda leaned down until her face was inches from Emma's. "What did you say to me?" "Nothing, Mrs. Thornton. I'm sorry." "That's what I thought." 2-year-old Noah sat on the kitchen floor, frozen beside his toy blocks. He didn't cry. He didn't move. He just watched with eyes that had learned too young that silence was survival. Alexander's grip on the shears tightened until his hands ached. Every instinct screamed at him to burst through that door, to rip off this disguise, to protect his children the way a father should. But he couldn't. Not yet. He needed proof. He needed witnesses. He needed to make sure that when he finally destroyed Miranda, she would never come back. 3 weeks earlier, Alexander had sat across from his lawyer and oldest friend in a downtown Los Angeles office. Marcus Webb had known him for 20 years. They had built their careers together, survived divorces together, buried Alexander's first wife together. Marcus had never seen him like this. "You want to do what?" Marcus set down his coffee mug hard enough to spill. "Disguise yourself as a gardener. In your own house, Alex, this isn't a movie. It's the only way I'll know the truth." "What truth?" "Talk to me." Alexander stood and walked to the window. The LA skyline stretched before him, gleaming in the March sunlight. He had built half those buildings. He owned 3 of them. But none of it mattered if his children weren't safe. "Something's wrong with the kids," he said quietly. "Emma used to run to me every evening. Now she hides behind the couch when I walk in. Noah barely speaks anymore. And Miranda," he paused. "She's changed." "Changed how?" "Colder, controlling. She used to laugh with the kids. Now she gives them orders." Marcus leaned forward. "You think she's hurting them?" The question hung in the air like smoke. "Last week," Alexander said slowly, "Emma told me something strange. She said, when Daddy's gone, the rules are different. When I asked what she meant, she froze, said she was confused, but I saw it in her eyes, Marcus. Fear. Real fear." "Did you confront Miranda?" "About what? A gut feeling she'd just laugh it off. Call me paranoid." "So your solution is to spy on your own wife?" Alexander turned from the window. His jaw was set, his eyes hard. My solution is to protect my children. If I'm wrong, fine. But if I'm right, his voice dropped to something dangerous, then I'll do what I should have done months ago. Marcus studied his friend for a long moment. He had seen Alexander negotiate with corporate sharks, outmaneuver hostile takeovers, survive the death of his first wife without breaking. But he had never seen this look in his eyes. This was a father ready to burn down his own life to save his kids. This is legally risky, Marcus said finally. Privacy invasion, deception. If it goes wrong, it won't. Alex, I need your help, Marcus. Are you in or not? Marcus sighed heavily. He picked up his coffee, took a long sip, and nodded. Tell me the plan. It took 3 days to prepare. Alexander hired a struggling actor named Javier Ruiz to make occasional phone calls to Miranda, pretending to be him. Javier had the same deep voice, the same clipped business tone. He would call twice a week, ask about the kids, mention fake meetings with fake investors. Just keep it simple, Alexander told him. Don't improvise. Don't get creative. Answer her questions, tell her you love her, hang up. Got it, boss. Easy money. This isn't a joke. Javier saw the look in Alexander's eyes and straightened up. I understand. I'll do it right. Next came the disguise. Alexander visited 3 different thrift stores buying worn jeans, faded work shirts, and scuffed boots. He found a theatrical supply shop in Burbank that sold realistic fake beards. He practiced applying it in front of the mirror until he could do it in under 5 minutes. When he was finished, he barely recognized himself. The billionaire was gone. In his place stood a weathered man in his 50s, the kind of man who had spent his life working with his hands, who knew the weight of honest labor, who would never attract a second glance from a woman like Miranda. Perfect. The hardest part was telling Miranda about the trip. A whole month. She raised an eyebrow over her wine glass. Is that really necessary? The investors in New York want to review everything personally, Alexander said, keeping his voice casual. They're talking about a major expansion. I can't handle it remotely. And you can't fly back and forth. Too expensive. Too many meetings. Miranda nodded slowly. Something flickered in her eyes, relief, satisfaction, but it vanished before Alexander could be sure. The kids will miss you, she said flatly. I know. Take good care of them. She smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. Of course, darling. You can count on me. That night, as Alexander packed a suitcase he would never use, he heard Miranda's voice drifting from the hallway. She was on the phone, speaking in a low, excited whisper. Yes, he'll be gone for a whole month. Finally, I can get this house under control. Alexander's blood ran cold. Get this house under control. What the hell did that mean? The gardener arrived the next morning. Rosa Martinez opened the back door and studied the man standing on the porch. He was older, maybe mid-50s, with a thick gray beard and calloused hands. His clothes were clean but worn. His eyes were kind but tired. You must be the new gardener, she said warmly. I'm Rosa. Mrs. Thornton told me you'd be starting today. Name's David, Alexander said, lowering his voice to a rough growl. Appreciate the work. Come in. I'll show you around. Rosa walked him through the property, explaining the tasks: trimming the hedges, cleaning the fountain, maintaining the rose garden. Alexander listened carefully, studying her as she spoke. She was about 28, with dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. Her manner was professional but warm. She spoke to him like an equal, not like the hired help. The roses are Mr. Thornton's pride, she said, pointing to the garden behind the house. He planted them himself when his daughter was born. Mrs. Thornton doesn't care much about them, but I try to keep them nice. They're beautiful. Alexander murmured, his throat tightening. He had planted those roses the day Emma came home from the hospital. Catherine had laughed at him, called him sentimental, but she had helped him dig the holes anyway, her pregnant belly round under her gardening gloves. That was 7 years ago. Catherine had been dead for 2, and now a stranger was caring for the roses he had planted for his daughter. "Are you all right?" Rosa asked, frowning. "You look pale." "Fine, just the heat." She didn't believe him, but she didn't push. "The children are Emma and Noah," she continued. 6 and 2. They're sweet kids, but quiet. Very quiet. Quiet how? Rosa hesitated. Her eyes darted toward the house, then back to Alexander. "Maybe I'm imagining things," she said carefully. "Forget I said anything." But Alexander had seen it, the flicker of concern, the protective instinct. Rosa knew something was wrong. She just couldn't prove it. Neither could he, not yet. The first day passed slowly. Alexander worked in the garden, his soft hands blistering from the tools, his back aching from bending over flower beds. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the ache of watching his home from the outside, pretending to be a stranger in his children's world. Around mid-morning, the glass door opened. Emma stepped out, holding Noah's tiny hand. "Who's that?" she whispered to Rosa. "The new gardener. His name's David." Emma studied him with innocent curiosity. She had Catherine's eyes bright blue, full of questions, but the spark that used to light them was dimmer now. "Good morning," Alexander said quietly, keeping his voice low. "Good morning, sir." Sir? His own daughter had called him sir. The word hit him like a punch to the chest. He forced himself to keep working, to keep his head down, to pretend he was nothing more than another employee. But inside, something was breaking. By the third day, Alexander had developed a routine. He arrived early before Miranda woke up. He worked in the garden, positioning himself near windows and doors where he could hear conversations. He ate lunch under the oak tree, the same one he had planted when Emma was born, and talked with Rosa during her breaks. She was careful at first, guarded, but gradually she began to open up. "The kids are good," she said one afternoon, picking at her sandwich. "Sweet, but something's off." "Off how?" "They jump at loud noises. They apologize for everything, even things that aren't their fault. And when Mrs. Thornton walks into a room..." Rosa paused. "They freeze, like deer in headlights." Alexander's jaw tightened. "Have you seen anything specific?" Rosa looked at him for a long moment. Her dark eyes searched his face, looking for something, trustworthiness maybe, or just someone who would listen. "I've seen enough," she said finally. "But I can't prove anything, and I need this job." "Why? My mother's sick. The medical bills..." She shook her head. "I can't afford to lose this position." Alexander nodded slowly. He understood the trap she was in. Speak up, and lose everything. Stay silent, and watch children suffer. "Sometimes," he said carefully, "doing the right thing costs more than we can afford." Rosa smiled sadly. "My father used to say that. He believed kindness was a kind of strength." "Sounds like a wise man." "He was. I miss him every day." They sat in silence for a moment, two strangers connected by something neither of them could name. Then Rosa stood brushing crumbs from her apron. "I should get back. Mrs. Thornton doesn't like me taking long breaks." "Rosa." Alexander caught her arm gently. "Whatever you've seen, you're not imagining it." She looked at him, startled. "How do you know?" "Because I've seen it too." That night, Alexander sat alone in his motel room, peeling off the fake beard. The adhesive left red marks on his skin, but he barely noticed. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through old photos. Emma's first dance recital, Noah's second birthday, Both kids smiling wide faces, sticky with frosting eyes, bright with joy. When had that light gone out? His phone buzzed. Miranda calling. He let it ring twice before answering. "Hi, sweetheart." Her voice was sugar-sweet, the perfect wife. "How are those meetings going?" "Long days, lots of paperwork. We're making progress." "Good." She paused. "The kids are doing wonderfully. They're finally learning some discipline." Discipline, structure, routine. They were so wild before, always running around making noise. Now they're quiet, respectful. You'd be proud. Alexander's grip tightened on the phone. "That's good to hear. When you get back, you'll see the difference. I've worked so hard with them." "I'm sure you have. I love you, darling." "Love you too." He hung up and stared at the wall for a long time. Quiet, respectful. She had said those words like accomplishments, but Alexander knew the truth. His children weren't becoming disciplined. They were becoming afraid. The fourth day started like the others. Alexander arrived early, trimmed the hedges, cleaned the fountain. But around mid-morning he heard raised voices from inside the house. He crept to the kitchen window and crouched behind the rose bushes. Miranda stood in the middle of the bright marble kitchen, holding a piece of paper. Emma stood before her, hands clasped behind her back, head bowed. "What is this?" Miranda demanded, waving the paper. "My drawing," Emma whispered. "Of what? Of Mommy." Alexander's heart stopped. "Mommy," Miranda laughed high and sharp. "That's not me. Not you, my real mommy." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Then Miranda moved. Fast. She grabbed the drawing and tore it in half, then in half again, then again, until nothing remained but scraps. "Your real mother is dead," she said coldly. "I am your mother now. You will respect me and you will forget about her. Do you understand?" Emma's small body trembled. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I said, do you understand?" "Yes, Mrs. Thornton." "Good. Now pick up this mess and throw it away. Every piece." Emma dropped to her knees and began gathering the scraps of her mother's portrait. Her tiny hands shook as she worked. Outside, Alexander pressed his forehead against the wall, his whole body shaking. He could feel Catherine's presence, her gentle spirit, her boundless love for their children. And he could feel it being erased piece by piece by the monster he had brought into their home. That night, he made a decision. He bought a small digital recorder from an electronics store. He practiced hiding it in his shirt pocket, testing the sound quality, making sure it would capture every word. The watching phase was over. Now came the gathering. Over the next week, Alexander collected evidence. He recorded Miranda's voice through the kitchen window. "Fear works better than love. Love makes children spoiled." He recorded her threatening Rosa. "If I even suspect you're undermining me, I'll make sure you never work in this city again." He recorded her scolding Emma for invisible mistakes. "Your bed is a mess. Your room is a mess. You are a mess. Maybe if I stopped feeding you, you'd learn to appreciate what you have." Each recording was another nail in her coffin. Each word was proof of who she really was behind closed doors. But the worst moment came on a Thursday afternoon. Alexander was trimming bushes near Lily's bedroom window when he heard Noah crying. He looked up just in time to see Miranda storm into the room, face twisted with fury. "What is this?" She held up a small stuffed elephant, the toy Noah had slept with every night since Catherine died. The last gift his mother had ever given him. "Mine." Noah whimpered, reaching for it. "It's filthy. Disgusting." Miranda walked to the window and threw it into the garden below. "You're not a baby anymore. Stop acting like one." Noah's wails echoed through the house. Emma ran in and wrapped her arms around her brother, trying to comfort him. "Quiet!" Miranda snapped. "Both of you. I'm getting a headache." She walked out without looking back. Alexander found the elephant lying in the dirt near the rose bushes. He picked it up, brushed off the soil, and tucked it into his pocket. That night in his motel room, he held the small toy and wept. It was the first time he had cried since Catherine's funeral. By the end of the second week, Alexander had everything he needed. Hours of recordings, detailed notes, timestamps and dates and witnesses. But he wanted more. He wanted Miranda to expose herself in front of people who couldn't look away. He wanted her to show her true face when she thought she was safest. The opportunity came on a Saturday morning. Miranda was hosting her weekly ladies' brunch, 3 neighborhood women who came to gossip, drink mimosas, and admire her perfect life. They had no idea what happened when they left. Alexander arrived early and positioned himself near the terrace, trimming hedges that didn't need trimming. He could hear everything through the open French doors. "Children," Miranda called sweetly. "Come say hello to my friends." Emma appeared at the top of the stairs, holding Noah's hand. She wore a pale blue dress with a ribbon tied too tight around her waist. Noah stumbled beside her, still learning to balance. "Aren't they adorable?" one woman gushed. "Little angels," said another. "Thank you." Miranda smiled, all warmth and charm. "They're finally learning proper behavior. A bit of structure works wonders." She guided the children forward like trophies on display. "Show the ladies how polite you can be." Emma curtsied slightly. "Good afternoon, ladies." "Oh, how precious." Alexander watched from behind the hedges, his stomach churning. These women saw the performance. They didn't see the bruises. They didn't hear the crying at night. They didn't know that these children had learned to be polite because the alternative was too terrifying to risk. After 10 minutes of shallow conversation, Miranda dismissed the kids. "Run along now. Adults are talking." "Yes, Mrs. Thornton," Emma said automatically. One of the women frowned. "Mrs. Thornton, don't they call you Mom?" Miranda laughed lightly. "Oh, I prefer a bit of formality. It teaches respect." The women exchanged glances, but said nothing. Alexander's hands tightened on the shears. This was it. This was the moment he had been waiting for. All he needed was one more push. And Miranda, as if reading his thoughts, provided it herself. The brunch continued. Mimosas flowed. Laughter echoed across the terrace. Then Emma made a mistake. She reached for a glass of water, just a simple glass, nothing more, and her small hand slipped. The glass tumbled from the table and shattered on the marble floor. The sound cut through the conversation like a knife. Every head turned. Miranda's face transformed. The charming hostess vanished. In her place stood something cold, something cruel, something that had been hiding in plain sight all along. "Look what you've done," she hissed. "I'm sorry," Emma whispered, backing away. "I didn't mean... Sorry. Sorry doesn't clean up this mess. Sorry doesn't pay for that glass." "Miranda," one of the women said nervously, "it was just an accident. Stay out of this." Miranda's voice was ice. She grabbed Emma's arm and yanked her forward. "How many times do I have to teach you? How many times?" She raised her hand. Alexander dropped the shears and stepped forward, but someone else got there first. Rosa appeared from nowhere, throwing herself between Miranda and the child. "Stop!" The slap hit Rosa instead, hard, Loud. Her head snapped to the side and she stumbled backward, one hand pressed to her cheek. The terrace went silent. "How dare you!" Miranda's voice shook with rage. "How dare you interfere!" Rosa straightened slowly. Her cheek was already turning red, but her eyes were steady. "I won't let you hit her," she said quietly. "She's 6 years old. She's just a child." "You're fired. Do you hear me? Fired. I'll make sure you never work again. Do what you have to." Rosa's voice didn't waver. "But you will not touch her." The three guests sat frozen mimosas, forgotten faces, pale with shock. And then a voice cut through the silence, a voice that didn't belong to a gardener. "That's enough." Everyone turned. Alexander Thornton stood at the edge of the terrace. His weathered clothes were dirty. His boots scuffed, his hands rough from 2 weeks of honest labor. But his eyes were the eyes of a billionaire, the eyes of a father, the eyes of a man who had seen enough. Miranda sneered. "And who do you think you are? Get back to work before I fire you too." Alexander didn't move. Instead, he reached up and peeled the fake beard from his face. The world stopped. One of the women gasped. Another dropped her glass. Miranda's face went white. "No," she breathed. "That's impossible. You're in New York. You're—" "Surprise," Alexander said coldly. He let the beard fall to the ground. "Hello, Miranda. Miss me?" The silence stretched across the terrace like a held breath. Miranda stood frozen, her raised hand still hovering in the air, her face cycling through emotions too fast to name. Confusion, disbelief, fear, and finally something that looked almost like rage. "Alexander," her voice cracked on his name. This is some kind of joke. Do I look like I'm joking?" He stepped forward slowly, deliberately, each footstep echoing against the marble. The three brunch guests shrank back in their chairs, mimosas, forgotten eyes wide with the dawning realization that they had stumbled into something far beyond neighborhood gossip. "You were in New York," Miranda stammered. "I talked to you yesterday. You called me from your hotel room." "No. You talked to an actor I hired. A very talented one, apparently." "An actor?" She laughed, but it came out brittle fractured. "This is insane. You're insane. Why would I disguise myself as a gardener in my own home?" Alexander's voice was calm, almost conversational, but his eyes burned. "Why would I spend 2 weeks watching my children through windows? Why would I listen to my wife threaten a 6-year-old girl for spilling a glass of water?" Miranda's composure cracked further. She glanced at her friends, searching for allies, but found only horror. "Whatever you think you saw," she said quickly, "you're misunderstanding. I was disciplining them. Children need boundaries, structure. You're always traveling, always working. Someone has to teach them. Teach them what?" Alexander cut her off. To be afraid, to flinch when an adult raises their voice, to call their stepmother Mrs. Thornton instead of Mom because they're terrified of making her angry. "That's not—" "I heard everything, Miranda. Every word. Every threat." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small digital recorder. Miranda's eyes locked onto it like a snake watching a mongoose. "What is that? Insurance?" Alexander pressed play. Miranda's own voice filled the terrace, cold and unmistakable. "Fear works better than love. Love makes children spoiled." The recording continued. "Your real mother is dead. I am your mother now. You will respect me, and you will forget about her. And then, if I stopped feeding you, maybe you'd learn to appreciate what you have." One of the brunch guests stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the marble. "I think we should go." "Sit down," Alexander said quietly. "Please." Something in his tone made her obey. Miranda lunged for the recorder. "Turn that off. You had no right to record me in my own home." "My home," Alexander corrected, pulling the device out of reach. "This is my home. These are my children. And you—" He paused, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "You are a guest who has overstayed her welcome." "You can't do this." Miranda's voice rose to a shriek. "You can't just spy on me and then throw accusations around. I have rights. I'm your wife. Not for much longer." The words landed like a physical blow. Miranda staggered back her hand, finding the terrace railing for support. "What? My lawyer has been drawing up divorce papers since last Tuesday. You'll be served by the end of the day." "You're bluffing." "I never bluff." Alexander's gaze was steady, unflinching. "You'll pack your things. You'll leave this house. And you will never see these children again." "They're my stepchildren. I have rights. You have nothing." Alexander stepped closer, and for the first time, Miranda looked genuinely afraid. "No prenup protects someone who abuses children. No court will grant custody to a woman caught on tape threatening to starve a 6-year-old. You'll be lucky if I don't press charges." Miranda's face twisted. The mask she had worn for months finally shattered completely, revealing something ugly underneath. "You self-righteous bastard!" she spat. "You think you're so noble, so perfect. You were never here. You were always traveling, always working, always putting your precious company before your own family. I was the one taking care of those brats. I was the one dealing with their crying and their whining and their constant demands. And this is the thanks I get. Taking care of them." Alexander's voice hardened. "You call starving them taking care. You call destroying their mother's memory taking care. You threw away Noah's elephant, the last gift Catherine ever gave him. You tore up Emma's drawing of her mother and made her pick up the pieces. You made them afraid to exist in their own home. They needed discipline. They needed love." Alexander roared, his control finally breaking. "They lost their mother 2 years ago. They needed patience and kindness, and someone who would hold them when they cried. Instead, they got you." The words echoed across the terrace. No one moved. No one breathed. Rosa stood to the side, still holding her reddened cheek, tears streaming silently down her face. Emma and Noah huddled behind her, clinging to her legs like she was the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly gone mad. Alexander saw them watching. His children. His babies. Their eyes wide with fear and confusion and something that might have been hope. He forced himself to take a breath. Then another. When he spoke again, his voice was calm. "You have 1 hour to pack your personal belongings. Anything you bought with my money stays. My security team will escort you off the property. If you try to contact the children, if you come within 500 feet of this house, if you so much as mention their names in public, I will bury you in lawsuits so deep you'll never see daylight again." Miranda stared at him, chest-heaving, eyes wild. "You'll regret this," she whispered. "I'll make sure everyone knows what you did. How you spied on your own wife. How you humiliated me in front of my friends. You'll be ruined." "I don't think so." Alexander nodded toward the 3 women still frozen in their chairs. "These ladies just watched you slap a servant for protecting a child. They heard you scream at a 6-year-old for breaking a glass. They saw exactly who you are when you think no one important is watching." He paused. "Would any of you like to tell Miranda what you're going to say when people ask about today?" The women exchanged glances. One of them, a silver-haired woman in pearls, cleared her throat. "I think," she said carefully, that we saw a father protecting his children. Nothing more. Diane, Miranda gasped. We've been friends for years. We've been acquaintance, Diane corrected coolly. And I don't associate with people who hit children. The other two women nodded silently. Miranda's face crumpled. For a moment she looked almost human, lost, desperate, abandoned. Then the hardness returned. Fine, she snarled. Keep your precious children. Keep your perfect house. But this isn't over, Alexander. I promise you that. She turned and stormed toward the French doors, heels clicking like gunshots against the marble. At the threshold she paused and looked back. You'll never find anyone who loves you, she said, her voice dripping with venom. You're too broken, too cold, too obsessed with control. Catherine was the only one who could stand you, and she died to get away. Alexander didn't flinch. Get out of my house. Miranda disappeared inside. A moment later they heard doors slamming, drawers opening, the sounds of a life being hastily dismantled. The three brunch guests rose quietly. We'll see ourselves out, Diane said. She paused beside Alexander, her expression softening. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. We had no idea. No one did. That was the point. Diane nodded and led the other women toward the side gate. Their hushed whispers faded into silence. And then Alexander was alone with his children. He turned slowly. Emma and Noah still clung to Rosa, watching him with wide, uncertain eyes. They had seen him in his gardener's clothes for 2 weeks, calling him Sir and David. Now they knew the truth, but they didn't seem to know what to do with it. Alexander knelt down on the marble terrace, putting himself at their eye level. Emma, he said softly. Noah, come here. Emma hesitated. Her small hand tightened on Rosa's dress. It's okay, Rosa whispered gently, loosening the girl's grip. Go to your daddy. But Emma's voice was barely audible. He was the gardener. He was always your father, Rosa said. He was just wearing a costume, like Halloween. Emma processed this slowly. Then, like a dam breaking, she burst into tears and ran into Alexander's arms. Daddy, she sobbed. Daddy, I was so scared. She was so mean. She tore up my picture of Mommy, and she threw away Noah's elephant, and she said I was stupid, and shh. Alexander held her tight, his own tears falling freely now. I know, baby. I know. I heard everything. And I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I wasn't there. You were there, Emma hiccuped. You were the gardener. You were there the whole time. I was, and I should have stopped it sooner. I should have protected you better. Why didn't you tell us? Why did you pretend to be someone else? Alexander pulled back slightly, cupping his daughter's face in his rough, work-worn hands. Because I needed to see what was happening when I wasn't around. And I needed other people to see it too. I needed to make sure that when I sent her away, she could never come back. She can't come back. Never. Promise. I promise. Emma collapsed against his chest again, sobbing with relief. Noah toddled forward uncertainly, not quite understanding what was happening, but sensing that something important had changed. Alexander gathered him up with his other arm, holding both children close. It's over, he murmured into their hair. It's all over now. Rosa stood apart from them, wiping tears from her cheeks. She had stopped being an employee in that moment. She had stopped being a stranger. She had become something else entirely, something Alexander didn't have a name for yet. Rosa, he said over his children's heads. She looked up. Thank you. She shook her head. I didn't do anything. You took a slap meant for my daughter. You stood between her and Miranda when no one else would. You could have lost your job, your income, everything. But you didn't hesitate. She's a child, Rosa said simply. I couldn't let her be hurt. Most people would have looked the other way. Most people haven't seen what I've seen. Alexander studied her for a long moment. There was something in her eyes, a depth of experience, a quiet strength that he hadn't noticed during their conversations under the oak tree. What have you seen? He asked softly. Rosa hesitated. She glanced at the children still pressed against their father's chest, then back at Alexander. I worked for another family once, she said slowly. 5 years ago. The father was cruel to his son. Not hitting, he was too smart for that. But words can hurt worse than fists. He told that boy every day that he was worthless, stupid, a disappointment. I watched it happen for months. What did you do? Nothing. Rosa's voice caught. I needed the job. My mother was sick. I couldn't afford to speak up, so I stayed quiet and watched that child shrink smaller every day. What happened to him? He went to live with his grandmother eventually, after things got worse. She paused. I heard later that he tried to hurt himself. He was 9 years old. Alexander's arms tightened around his children. I swore I'd never stay silent again, Rosa continued. No matter the cost, I'd rather lose 1,000 jobs than watch another child be broken. And today I kept that promise. Alexander rose slowly, lifting Noah onto his hip. Emma stayed close, her hand gripping his shirt like she was afraid he might disappear again. Rosa, look at me. She met his gaze. You're not going to lose this job, he said. You're not going to lose anything. Whatever you need for your mother, for yourself, I'll make sure you have it. Mr. Thornton, I can't accept. It's not charity. It's payment for services rendered. He smiled faintly. You protected my children when I couldn't. You stood up to a woman who terrified you because it was the right thing to do. That's worth more than I can ever repay. Rosa opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. Something shifted in her expression. Surprise, gratitude, and something else that looked almost like hope. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you. They stood in silence for a moment, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the terrace. Then Emma tugged at Alexander's sleeve. Daddy, yes, sweetheart, is the bad lady gone forever? Forever. And Rosa's staying. Alexander looked at Rosa, who was watching Emma with such tenderness that it made his chest ache. Would you like her to stay? He asked. Emma nodded vigorously. She gave us extra food when we were hungry. She saved Noah's elephant. She read us stories at night when the mean lady wasn't looking. You saved Noah's elephant. Alexander looked at Rosa in surprise. Rosa shrugged. I fished it out of the garbage after Mrs. Thornton threw it away. Washed it, dried it, hid it in my room. I was going to give it back when the time was right. Alexander felt something crack open in his chest. Where is it now? In my nightstand. I'll get it. She started toward the house, but Alexander caught her arm gently. Wait. Rosa turned back, uncertain. Bring it to him tonight, Alexander said. At bedtime. I think it should come from you. Rosa's eyes glistened. Are you sure? I'm sure. She nodded and wiped her cheeks quickly. From inside the house came the sound of a door slamming, followed by the click of heels descending the staircase. Alexander tensed. Stay here with the children. He walked toward the French doors, his gardener's boots scuffing against the marble. In the foyer, Miranda stood with 2 suitcases, her face carefully composed into something approaching dignity. I want my jewelry, she said flatly. The diamond earrings you gave me for our anniversary. The Cartier watch. They're yours. Take them. And the Mercedes. The Mercedes belongs to the company. Then I'll call a taxi. I'll have my driver take you." Miranda's eyes narrowed. "I don't want anything from you." "Then walk." She grabbed her suitcases and strode toward the front door. At the threshold, she paused one final time. "You know," she said without turning around, "Catherine would have been disappointed in you, sneaking around your own home, lying to your wife, playing dress-up like a child." "Catherine would have protected Emma and Noah," Alexander replied calmly. "By any means necessary. You tell yourself that." "I don't need to tell myself anything. I know who she was. I know who you are. And I know the difference." Miranda's shoulders stiffened. Then, without another word, she walked out of the house and out of their lives. Alexander watched until her figure disappeared down the long driveway. Then he closed the door quietly and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. It was over. 2 weeks of watching, of waiting, of pretending to be someone else in his own home. 2 weeks of blistered hands and aching backs, and a heart that broke a little more each day. 2 weeks of seeing his children suffer and forcing himself not to intervene. All of it led to this moment. The house was quiet now. Not the oppressive silence of fear, but something softer, something that felt almost like peace. He walked back to the terrace where Rosa sat with Emma and Noah. She had found some cookies somewhere and was breaking them into small pieces for Noah, who stuffed them into his mouth with single-minded determination. Emma sat beside her head, resting on Rosa's shoulder, eyes half closed with exhaustion. "She's gone," Alexander said. Rosa looked up. "For good. For good." Emma stirred slightly. "Daddy, I'm tired." "I know. Sweetheart, it's been a long day. Can Rosa come with us?" "When we go inside," Alexander glanced at Rosa, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Yes," he said. "Rosa can come." They walked into the house together, the billionaire in his gardener's clothes, the maid with a handprint still fading on her cheek, and the 2 children who had survived something they were too young to understand. That evening, Alexander ordered pizza, and they ate it on the floor of the living room, like a family that had never heard of formal dining. Emma laughed for the first time in weeks when a piece of pepperoni slid off her slice and landed on Noah's head. Noah shrieked with delight and tried to put it in his mouth anyway. Rosa watched them from the corner of the couch, a small smile playing at her lips. "Mr. Thornton," she said quietly. "Alexander," he corrected. "After today, I think we're past formalities." She ducked her head, but he caught the hint of a blush on her cheeks. "Alexander," she tried again. "What happens now?" "What do you mean? With the children? With everything?" Alexander looked at his daughter, who was trying to teach Noah how to hold a pizza slice without dropping it. She was being patient in a way that broke his heart, the patience of a child who had learned to take care of herself because no one else would. "Now," he said slowly, "we rebuild. We find a good therapist for the kids. We create new routines that don't involve fear. We learn how to be a family again." "That sounds..." Rosa hesitated. "That sounds like a lot of work." "It will be." Alexander turned to look at her directly. "I was hoping you might be willing to help." "Help how?" "The children trust you. They feel safe with you. After everything that's happened, I think they need stability more than anything else. Someone consistent. Someone kind." He paused. "Someone like you." Rosa's eyes widened. "You want me to stay? I want you to stay. Not as a maid, you've proven yourself far beyond that. As something more, a caretaker, a guardian, a member of this family if you'll have us." "I don't know what to say." "Say yes." Rosa looked at Emma and Noah, who had abandoned the pizza, and were now building some kind of tower out of couch cushions. They had known her for less than a month, but they had trusted her with their secrets, their fears, their small rebellions against an unkind world. She had become their protector without even meaning to. "Yes," she said softly. "I'll stay." Alexander exhaled slowly, and something in his chest loosened for the first time in weeks. "Good," he said. "That's good." Later that night, after Emma and Noah had been bathed and put to bed, Alexander found Rosa in the kitchen, cleaning up the pizza boxes. She had changed out of her uniform into regular clothes jeans and a simple blue blouse, and looked younger somehow, less guarded. "You don't have to clean," he said. "Old habits." "Rosa." He walked closer, leaning against the counter beside her. "Can I ask you something personal?" She stiffened slightly, but nodded. "When you took that slap for Emma, were you afraid?" Rosa was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Terrified. But you did it anyway. Some things matter more than fear." Alexander studied her profile, the soft curve of her jaw, the determined set of her shoulders, the quiet strength that radiated from every line of her body. "My wife died 2 years ago," he said softly. "Catherine. She was everything. The best part of me. When she got sick, I thought I could fix it. I have all this money, all this power, and I couldn't save her. I'm sorry. After she died, I threw myself into work. Told myself the children needed stability, needed routine. I hired nannies and housekeepers and told myself that was enough. Then I met Miranda, and she seemed perfect. Beautiful, charming patient with the kids." He laughed bitterly. "I was so desperate to fill the hole Catherine left that I didn't see what was right in front of me. You couldn't have known. I should have known. I should have paid attention. Instead, I handed my children to a monster and flew off to make more money." His voice cracked slightly. "They called her Mrs. Thornton Rosa. My 6-year-old daughter called her stepmother Mrs. Thornton because she was too afraid to call her anything else. And I had no idea." Rosa set down the paper towels she had been using and turned to face him fully. "Listen to me," she said firmly. "You made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But the moment you suspected something was wrong, you did everything in your power to uncover the truth. You disguised yourself as a gardener and worked in your own garden for 2 weeks. You slept in a motel room while your mansion stood empty. You endured blisters and backaches and the heartbreak of watching your children suffer because you knew it was the only way to protect them permanently." She paused. "That's not failure. That's love." Alexander stared at her. No one had spoken to him like that in years. Not his business partners, not his lawyers, not any of the carefully managed relationships that filled his professional life. Just raw honesty, unfiltered and unafraid. "You're remarkable," he said quietly. Rosa blushed and looked away. "I'm just a maid." "No. You're the woman who stood between my daughter and a monster without hesitating. You're the woman who saved my son's elephant and hid it in your nightstand for weeks. You're the woman who snuck extra food to hungry children even though it could have cost you everything." He reached out and touched her hand gently. "You're not just anything, Rosa. You're extraordinary." She didn't pull away. They stood there in the quiet kitchen, 2 people who had found each other in the strangest of circumstances, bound together by shared courage and unexpected trust. "It's late," Rosa finally said. "I should let you rest." "Stay." She looked up sharply. "Not like that," Alexander added quickly. "I meant, stay in the house tonight. There are plenty of guest rooms. I don't want you going back to wherever you've been living at this hour. I live in a studio apartment 20 minutes from here. It's perfectly safe." "Please." His voice softened. "The children will want to see you in the morning. It would mean a lot to them. And to me." Rosa hesitated. Then she nodded slowly. Just for tonight. Just for tonight. She turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. Alexander. Yes. That night in the garden when you asked me what I'd seen, you looked at me like you actually wanted to know, like my answer mattered. It did. It does. Why? Alexander considered the question carefully. Because I spent 2 weeks being invisible, he said finally. Learning what it feels like to be overlooked, dismissed, spoken to like you're less than human. It changes you, makes you see things differently. He paused. You were the only person in this house who treated David the gardener like a human being. That tells me everything I need to know about who you really are. Rosa's eyes glistened in the dim kitchen light. Good night, Alexander. Good night, Rosa. She disappeared down the hallway, and Alexander stood alone in his kitchen, listening to the silence of a house that finally felt like home. Rosa woke before dawn. For a moment she forgot where she was. The bed was too soft, the sheets too clean, the silence too complete. Then memory rushed back, the slap, the revelation, Alexander peeling off his fake beard like shedding a second skin, and she sat up abruptly, heart pounding. She was in one of the Thornton mansion's guest rooms. She had slept in her clothes because she had nothing else to wear. And somewhere down the hall, a billionaire and his 2 traumatized children were starting a new chapter of their lives. A chapter she had somehow become part of. Rosa swung her legs over the side of the bed and pressed her palms against her eyes. What was she doing here yesterday? She had been a maid, invisible and expendable. Today she was... what exactly? A guardian. A family member. The woman Alexander Thornton had called extraordinary. She didn't feel extraordinary. She felt terrified. A soft knock on the door made her jump. Rosa? Emma's small voice filtered through the wood. Are you awake? Rosa crossed the room quickly and opened the door. Emma stood in the hallway in her pajamas, clutching a worn blanket, her eyes still puffy from sleep. Hey, sweetheart. What's wrong? I had a bad dream. About what? Emma hesitated. Her lower lip trembled. About her. She came back. She was really angry. She said Daddy couldn't protect us forever. Rosa knelt down and took Emma's hands in hers. Listen to me, she said firmly. That woman is never coming back. Your daddy made sure of it. She can't hurt you anymore. But what if she tries? Then she'll have to go through me first. Emma studied Rosa's face with an intensity that seemed too old for her 6 years. You got hit because of me, she whispered. Does it still hurt? Rosa touched her cheek reflexively. The bruise had darkened overnight, a purple shadow along her cheekbone. A little, she admitted, but I've had worse. Why did you do it? Do what? Jump in front of me. You could have just stayed quiet like everyone else. Rosa felt something tighten in her chest. Because staying quiet is how bad things keep happening, she said softly. Because you're a little girl who deserves to feel safe. Because some things matter more than keeping your head down and hoping for the best. Emma processed this slowly. Then she did something that caught Rosa completely off guard. She threw her arms around Rosa's neck and held on tight. Thank you, Emma whispered into her shoulder. Thank you for saving me. Rosa closed her eyes and hugged her back, breathing in the scent of children's shampoo and sleep-warm skin. She had known this child for less than a month, but in that moment she would have walked through fire for her. Always, she murmured. I'll always protect you. They stayed like that, until footsteps approached down the hallway. "There you are." Alexander's voice was thick with sleep. "I woke up, and your bed was empty, Emma. I got worried." "I had a nightmare," Emma said, pulling back from Rosa, but keeping hold of her hand. "Rosa made me feel better." Alexander looked at them, his daughter clinging to the woman who had taken a slap for her, both of them still rumpled from sleep, and something shifted in his expression, something soft and grateful and almost wondering. "Did she now?" She said she'd always protect me. I believe her. Alexander crouched down to Emma's level. "How about some breakfast? I make terrible pancakes, but I'm told the effort counts." Emma giggled. It was the most beautiful sound Rosa had ever heard. "Can Rosa help, if she wants to?" They both looked at Rosa expectantly. She felt suddenly aware of her wrinkled clothes, her unbrushed hair, her bare feet on the cold hardwood floor. "I should probably go home first," she said. "Get changed. Come back later." "Or," Alexander said carefully, "you could borrow something of mine for now. We have a lot to figure out today, and I'd rather not do it alone." Rosa hesitated. This was happening too fast. Yesterday she had been the maid. Today she was being invited to family breakfast like she belonged there. But Emma was still holding her hand, still looking up at her with those big blue eyes full of trust. "Okay," Rosa heard herself say. "I'll stay." 20 minutes later, she stood in Alexander's massive kitchen, wearing one of his old college sweatshirts and a pair of his sister's yoga pants that had been left behind years ago. The sweatshirt hung past her thighs and smelled faintly of laundry detergent and something else, something warm and masculine that she tried not to think about. Alexander stood at the stove attempting to flip a pancake while Noah sat in his high chair smearing banana across his face with cheerful abandon. "You're going to burn that," Rosa observed. "I know what I'm doing." "The edges are smoking." "That's intentional. Crispy edges." "That's not crispy. That's charcoal." Alexander glared at her, but there was no heat in it. "I'm a billionaire. I've built companies from nothing. I've negotiated deals with some of the most ruthless people on the planet. I can make a pancake." "Uh-huh." Rosa gently hip-checked him away from the stove. "Go sit with your children. I'll handle this." "But, Alexander, sit." He sat. Rosa salvaged what she could of his pancake disaster and started fresh. Within 15 minutes, she had produced a stack of golden brown circles that actually looked edible. Emma ate 3 of them smothered in maple syrup. Noah managed to get more on his face than in his mouth, but he seemed happy about it. Alexander watched the whole scene with an expression that Rosa couldn't quite read. "You're staring," she said without looking up. "Sorry, it's just—" He shook his head. "Catherine used to make pancakes like that, every Sunday morning. The kids loved it." Rosa's hands stilled on the spatula. "I can stop. If it's too—" "No." Alexander's voice was firm. "Don't stop. It's good. It's exactly what this house needs." After breakfast, while Rosa cleaned up and the children watched cartoons in the living room, Alexander's phone rang. "Marcus," he said, answering. "What's the situation?" Rosa couldn't hear the other end of the conversation, but she watched Alexander's face darken. "She what?" A pause. "That's ridiculous. She can't possibly think." Another pause longer this time. "Fine. I'll be there in an hour. Make sure she doesn't leave." He hung up and stood motionless for a moment, jaw tight. "What happened?" Rosa asked. "Miranda." The name came out like a curse. "She's at my lawyer's office. She's contesting the divorce." "Can she do that?" "She's claiming emotional distress. Says I entrapped her. Manipulated her into acting out of character. She wants half of everything plus alimony. Rosa felt her stomach drop. But you have the recordings. You have witnesses. She's saying I violated her privacy, that the recordings were obtained illegally and shouldn't be admissible. Alexander ran a hand through his hair. My own lawyer thinks she might have a case. That's insane. Welcome to the American legal system. He grabbed his jacket from the back of a chair. I have to go deal with this. Will you be okay with the kids? Of course, but Alexander... He paused at the doorway. She doesn't get to win, Rosa said fiercely. Not after what she did. Not after everything. Something flickered in Alexander's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or gratitude. I won't let her, he said quietly. I promise. Then he was gone. The morning stretched into afternoon. Rosa played with the children, read them stories, made them lunch. She tried not to think about what was happening in Marcus Webb's office, but the worry gnawed at her constantly. Around 2 o'clock, Emma found her in the kitchen washing dishes. Rosa, can I ask you something? Of course, sweetheart. Do you like my daddy? Rosa nearly dropped the plate she was holding. What do you mean? I mean, do you like him? Like him? Rosa felt heat rise to her cheeks. Your daddy is a good man, Emma. I respect him very much. That's not what I asked. 6-year-olds, Rosa thought, were far too perceptive for their own good. I think, she said carefully, that I haven't known your daddy long enough to answer that question. Emma considered this. But if you did know him long enough, would you like him, Emma? Because I think he likes you. Rosa's heart stuttered. What makes you say that? He looks at you the way he used to look at Mommy. Not exactly the same, but close. Like you're important. Emma paused. And he never let the mean lady wear his sweatshirts. But he let you. Rosa looked down at the oversized college sweatshirt she was still wearing. Stanford class of '02. She hadn't thought about it when she put it on. It was just clothes. But Emma was right. It meant something. It meant Alexander trusted her with pieces of himself he didn't share easily. Your daddy has a lot on his mind right now, Rosa said finally. The most important thing is taking care of you and Noah. Everything else can wait. But you're not leaving, right? You're staying. I told you I would. Promise. Rosa knelt down and looked Emma directly in the eyes. I promise. Alexander returned at 4 o'clock. His face was drawn. His tie loosened dark circles under his eyes that hadn't been there that morning. The children are napping, Rosa said, meeting him in the foyer. What happened? She's not backing down. Alexander walked past her into the living room and collapsed onto the couch. She hired some shark lawyer from Beverly Hills. They're claiming I psychologically manipulated her, that I created a hostile environment that forced her to discipline the children harshly. That's a lie. I know it's a lie. You know it's a lie, but she's got 3 witnesses from the brunch who are apparently willing to say they saw a devoted stepmother pushed to her breaking point by an absent father. Diane said, Diane backed out. Miranda got to her somehow. Threatened her, bribed her, I don't know. The other 2 are following her lead. Rosa sank onto the couch beside him. So what do we do? Alexander laughed bitterly. We fight. Marcus says if we can prove a pattern of abuse, the recordings become admissible as evidence of ongoing harm. We need witnesses who saw Miranda's behavior over time, not just one isolated incident. I saw it, Rosa said immediately. Every day for 3 weeks. I can testify. You will. But Miranda's lawyers are going to paint you as a disgruntled employee trying to curry favor with the rich boss. We need more. What about the children? Alexander shook his head firmly. I won't put Emma on a witness stand. She's been through enough. Then what? Marcus is looking into Miranda's background, previous marriages, employment history, anyone who might have seen her real face before. If she did this to my kids, maybe she did it to others. Rosa reached out and touched his hand gently. We'll find something. She can't hide forever. Alexander looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment the exhaustion in his eyes softened into something else. Why are you helping me? He asked quietly. You could walk away, get another job, forget any of this ever happened. Because your children need me. Is that the only reason? Rosa's breath caught. No, she admitted. It's not. They sat in silence, her hand still resting on his, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. Then Noah's cry echoed from upstairs, breaking the spell. I'll get him, Rosa said quickly, pulling away. Rosa, we can talk later. Your son needs you more than I need answers. She hurried up the stairs before he could respond. The next few days blurred together. Alexander spent long hours with Marcus building their case. Rosa stayed with the children, creating a bubble of normalcy in the midst of chaos. She cooked meals and read stories and held Emma when the nightmares came. And slowly, almost without noticing, she became part of the family. On the fourth day, Marcus called with news. We found something. Alexander told Rosa that evening after the children were in bed. Miranda was married before, 10 years ago, to a man named David Chen in San Francisco. What happened? They divorced after 2 years. He claimed emotional abuse but couldn't prove it. The settlement was sealed, but Marcus has a contact in family law who remembers the case. Can we reach him? We're trying. He moved to Seattle after the divorce. Changed careers, changed his whole life. But if he's willing to testify, then we can prove this is a pattern. Exactly. Alexander's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned. Unknown number. Don't answer it. I have to. It might be Marcus's contact. He accepted the call. Hello? Rosa watched his face change. The color drained from his cheeks. His jaw went tight. How did you get this number? He demanded. Then, after a pause, that's not going to happen. Another pause. I don't care what you think you know. You're not coming anywhere near this house. He hung up abruptly. What was that? Rosa asked, alarmed. Miranda. Alexander's voice was flat, controlled, but Rosa could see his hands shaking. She says she has information that will destroy me. Claims she found something during our marriage that I don't want made public. What kind of information? I don't know, she wouldn't say. Just that if I don't drop the divorce and give her what she wants, she'll go to the press. Alexander, what could she possibly have? He was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, he said finally. But Miranda doesn't bluff. If she says she has something, she has something. Then we need to find out what it is before she uses it. How? Rosa thought quickly. She lived in this house for 6 months. She had access to everything, your office, your files, your personal records. If she found something, she found it here. I've been through my records 100 times. There's nothing. Maybe you're looking in the wrong place. Rosa stood up and began pacing. Think about it. She's not a business competitor. She doesn't care about your company or your investments. She cares about image, about appearances, about things that would embarrass you personally. Alexander went pale. The therapy records. What? After Catherine died, I saw a therapist for 6 months. Standard grief counseling. But I said things in those sessions. He trailed off. Private things. About my marriage. About my fears as a father. About moments when I considered giving up entirely. Would she have access to those? The therapist sent me copies of his notes when I ended treatment. I kept them in a locked drawer in my office. Is the drawer still locked? Alexander was already moving. They found the drawer open, the lock forced the folder of therapy notes gone. "She took them," Alexander said hollowly. "She's going to use my own words against me, make me look unstable, unfit to be a father. Those records are confidential. She can't just release them. She can if she leaks them anonymously. The press won't care how they got the story. They'll just run it." Rosa grabbed his shoulders and forced him to look at her. "Listen to me. Those therapy notes show a man dealing with grief in a healthy way. They show someone who loved his wife, who worried about his children, who was brave enough to ask for help when he needed it. That's not weakness, Alexander. That's strength. The press won't see it that way. Then we get ahead of it. How? You tell your own story before she tells it for you. Go public. Talk about Catherine. Talk about the therapy. Talk about what Miranda did to your children and why you had to stop her. Be honest. Be vulnerable. Be human. I've spent my entire career building a reputation for control, for competence. If I admit to struggling, then people will see you as a real person instead of a corporate robot." Rosa's voice softened. "Alexander, the world is full of fathers who pretend everything is fine while their families fall apart. Be different. Show them what it looks like to fight for your kids, even when you're breaking inside." Alexander stared at her for a long moment. "You really believe that I believe in you?" The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning that neither of them was quite ready to acknowledge. "Okay," Alexander said finally. "We'll do it your way." They worked through the night. Alexander wrote and rewrote his statement, while Rosa offered feedback, pushed back on anything that felt defensive or weak. By dawn, they had something that felt true. "Are you sure about this?" Rosa asked, as Alexander picked up his phone to call his publicist. "No," he admitted, "but I'm sure about you." He made the call. 24 hours later, Alexander Thornton appeared in a pre-recorded interview on national television. He talked about Catherine's death. He talked about his grief. He talked about the therapy sessions he'd undergone and the fears he'd expressed there. And then he talked about Miranda. He talked about disguising himself as a gardener because he suspected his children were being abused. He talked about what he'd seen through the kitchen window, what he'd heard through the recordings, what he'd felt watching his daughter shrink smaller every day. He talked about Rosa without naming her the brave woman who had taken a slap meant for his child, who had stood up to a monster when everyone else stayed silent. By the time the interview ended, social media had erupted. The response was overwhelming. Fathers posted about their own therapy journeys. Mothers shared stories of recognizing abuse in their own families. Thousands of people praised Alexander's courage, his honesty, his willingness to be vulnerable. And Miranda's leverage evaporated overnight. She released the therapy notes anyway, but it was too late. Alexander had already told the world everything they contained. The press treated the leak as a desperate move by a disgraced ex-wife, not a scandal worth covering. 3 days later, David Chen agreed to testify. He flew in from Seattle with his new wife, a kind-eyed woman named Jennifer, who held his hand through the entire meeting. "I should have fought harder back then," David told Alexander in Marcus's office. "I let her win because I was exhausted, because I thought no one would believe me. But watching your interview, I realized I wasn't alone, and I decided it was time to tell the truth." His testimony was devastating. He described a pattern of emotional manipulation, isolation from friends and family, subtle cruelties that escalated over time. He described the same cold smile Alexander had seen, the same controlled rage, the same ability to appear perfect in public while being monstrous in private. The judge ruled in Alexander's favor. Miranda was denied alimony. She was barred from contacting the children. Her claims of entrapment were dismissed, and the recordings were admitted as evidence of ongoing abuse. She left the courthouse without looking back, her expensive lawyer trailing behind her like a deflated balloon. Alexander walked out into the sunlight and took a breath so deep it felt like his first in months. "It's over," Marcus said, clapping him on the shoulder. "You won." "No," Alexander replied, looking at his phone where Rosa had sent a photo of Emma and Noah playing in the garden. "We won." That evening he came home to find Rosa and the children in the kitchen covered in flour. "We're making cookies," Emma announced, holding up a lopsided star shape. "Rosa's teaching us. I can see that." Alexander looked at Rosa, who had flour in her hair and chocolate smeared on her cheek. "You're a mess." "So are you." She pointed at his suit. "When's the last time you changed clothes?" "Touché." Noah ran toward him, arms outstretched, and Alexander scooped him up without hesitation. The boy smelled like sugar and vanilla, and something purely, perfectly childlike. "We made one for you, Daddy," Emma said, holding up a slightly burnt cookie in the shape of a heart. "Rosa said it's important to celebrate wins." Alexander looked at the cookie, then at his daughter, then at the woman standing behind her with flour in her hair and hope in her eyes. "She's right," he said softly. "It is." The weeks that followed the court victory moved like water finding its natural course. Slowly at first, testing the edges, then settling into something that felt almost like peace. Rosa never went back to her studio apartment. It happened gradually without any formal decision. First, she stayed one more night because Emma had a nightmare. Then another because Noah was running a fever. Then a week passed, and Alexander asked if she wanted her clothes brought over from her old place. "It seems silly for you to keep paying rent," he said carefully, "when there's more than enough room here." "I don't want to impose." "You're not imposing. The children need you. I need you." He paused. "If that's too much, tell me, and I'll back off." Rosa looked at him standing in his own kitchen, still wearing the rumpled suit from his workday, his hair mussed from where Emma had hugged him too tightly at dinner. He looked exhausted and hopeful and terrified of her answer. "It's not too much," she said quietly. Alexander's relief was visible. "I'll have someone bring your things tomorrow." Alexander: "Yes. Thank you. For everything." He shook his head. "You saved my children, Rosa. I should be thanking you every day for the rest of my life." "I didn't save them. I just refused to look away." "Sometimes that's the bravest thing anyone can do." They stood there for a moment, the space between them charged with something neither was ready to name. Then Noah's voice called from upstairs, asking for water, and the spell broke. "I'll get him," Rosa said. "I'll finish the dishes." It became their routine. Rosa handled the children while Alexander cleaned up after dinner. They met again in the living room afterward, sometimes talking, sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence while the house settled around them. Emma started therapy twice a week. Dr. Sarah Chen was a specialist in childhood trauma, a warm woman with silver-streaked hair and an office full of art supplies. She communicated with Alexander and Rosa through careful updates, never sharing Emma's confidences, but letting them know when progress was being made. "She's processing the experience well," Dr. Chen told them after the third session. "Children are remarkably resilient when they feel safe. Whatever you're doing at home, keep doing it." "Rosa deserves most of the credit," Alexander said. Rosa shook her head. "We're a team, Doctor." Chen looked between them with knowing eyes, but said nothing. At night, after the children were asleep, Rosa sometimes found herself wandering the halls of the mansion. It was still strange to her, this life of marble floors and fresh-cut flowers and a refrigerator that was never empty. She had grown up in a 2-bedroom apartment in East LA, sharing a room with her 2 sisters until she was 18. The idea of having a whole wing of a house to herself still felt like a dream she might wake from. One night, unable to sleep, she found Alexander in his study. He was sitting at his desk, staring at a photograph in an ornate silver frame. "Can't sleep either?" Rosa asked from the doorway. He looked up, unsurprised by her presence. "Bad habit. Catherine used to say I'd forget how to sleep if she wasn't there to remind me." Rosa walked closer. The photograph showed a younger Alexander, with a woman who could only be Catherine. She was beautiful in an unconventional way, with wild curly hair and laughing eyes, and a smile that seemed to light up the frame itself. "She was lovely," Rosa said softly. "She was everything." Alexander set the photo down gently. "I met her at a coffee shop, if you can believe it. I was 25, just starting my first company, living on ramen and ambition. She was a nurse at the children's hospital downtown. Worked double shifts to pay off her student loans. What happened? I spilled coffee on her scrubs." Alexander laughed at the memory. "She was furious. I was mortified. I offered to pay for dry cleaning, and she said I could pay for dinner instead. We were married a year later." "She sounds wonderful." "She was. She was the only person who ever told me I was being an idiot without being afraid of the consequences. She kept me honest, kept me human." He paused. "When she got sick, I tried to fix it the way I fix everything. Money specialists, experimental treatments. I flew her to Switzerland, to Japan, anywhere that offered even a sliver of hope. But it wasn't enough." "No, it wasn't." Alexander's voice cracked slightly. "She died at home in our bed, with Emma curled up beside her. Noah was too young to understand. He just kept asking where Mommy went." Rosa sat down in the chair across from him. "How did you survive it?" "I didn't at first. I went through the motions, hired nannies, buried myself in work, told myself the children were fine because I couldn't bear to look closely enough to see they weren't." He met her eyes. "And then I made the worst mistake of my life. I married Miranda because she seemed to fill the empty spaces, because she knew how to say the right things and smile at the right moments, because I was so desperate to feel something again that I didn't notice I was handing my children to a monster." "You couldn't have known. I should have known. A father should know when his children are suffering, but I was too wrapped up in my own grief to see clearly." Alexander leaned forward. "Rosa, do you know why I really disguised myself as a gardener? To catch Miranda. That was part of it. But the real reason—" He took a breath. "I needed to see my children the way a stranger would. I needed to watch them without being their father, without all the guilt and grief and exhaustion clouding my vision. I needed to understand who they had become while I wasn't paying attention." "And what did you see?" "I saw 2 children who had learned to be invisible, who flinched at loud noises and apologized for existing, who had stopped asking for things because they'd learned that asking led to pain." His voice hardened. "And I saw a woman who hid her cruelty behind closed doors, who smiled at dinner parties while starving my children at breakfast, who destroyed every trace of their mother's memory because she couldn't stand competition from a ghost." "You stopped her." "I almost didn't." "Every day I worked in that garden, I wanted to rip off the disguise and confront her. But I knew if I did, she'd find a way to spin it. She'd make me look like the crazy one. So I waited, and watched, and gathered evidence, while my children suffered. That must have been torture. It was the hardest thing I've ever done." Alexander looked at her. "Except for one moment." "What moment?" "The moment I watched you step between Miranda and Emma. When you took that slap without hesitating, when you stood there with a handprint on your face and told her she would not touch my daughter." His voice dropped to a whisper. "In that moment, I knew." "Knew what? That you were the one I'd been waiting for, not to replace Catherine, No one could ever do that. But to be someone new, someone who loves my children as fiercely as I do, someone brave enough to stand up when everyone else looks away. Rosa's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Alexander. I know it's too soon. I know you probably think I'm crazy. You've been here a few weeks and I'm talking like… He stopped himself. I'm sorry. Forget I said anything. No. He looked up sharply. No, I won't forget, Rosa said. And no, it's not too soon. Time doesn't work the way people think it does. Sometimes you know someone for years and never really see them. Sometimes you meet someone and within days you understand them better than anyone ever has. What are you saying? Rosa stood up and walked around the desk until she was standing right in front of him. I'm saying that when I took that slap for Emma, I wasn't thinking about my job or my reputation or my future. I was thinking that this little girl had already lost one mother, and I would die before I let anyone hurt her again. I was thinking that her father was somewhere out there working himself to death because he loved his children too much to trust anyone else to protect them. I was thinking that I had found something worth fighting for and I wasn't going to let go. Alexander rose slowly from his chair. They were inches apart now. Rosa, let me finish. She took a breath. I grew up poor. My mother cleaned houses for rich families until her back gave out. My father worked 2 jobs and still couldn't afford my sister's medical bills. I learned early that people like you and people like me don't end up together. That's not how the world works. The world is wrong. Maybe. But I also learned something else. Rosa met his eyes. I learned that money doesn't make someone good or bad. That kindness can exist anywhere in mansions and in shelters. That the measure of a person isn't what they have, but what they're willing to sacrifice for others. And what's my measure? You dressed up as a gardener for 2 weeks. You blistered your hands and slept in a motel and watched your children suffer because you knew it was the only way to save them. You gave up your pride, your comfort, your identity, all for them. Rosa's voice softened. That's your measure, Alexander, and it's more than enough. He reached out and touched her face gently, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone where Miranda's slap had left its mark weeks ago. You're extraordinary, he said. I meant it then. I mean it now. So are you. Does this mean… It means we take it slow. The children come first, always. Always, he agreed. And it means you stop blaming yourself for what Miranda did. You trusted the wrong person. It happens. What matters is what you do next. What am I doing next? Rosa smiled. Building something new, with your children. And if you want, with me. Alexander pulled her close and held her the way a man holds something precious, something he's afraid might disappear. I want, he whispered. God, I want. They stood there in the quiet study surrounded by books and photographs, and the lingering presence of a woman who had once been everything. And for the first time since Catherine's death, Alexander felt like the future might hold something other than grief. The next morning, Emma found them making breakfast together. She stood in the kitchen doorway, watching Rosa flip pancakes while Alexander attempted to pour orange juice without spilling. You're doing it wrong, Emma announced. I'm a billionaire, Alexander said dryly. I can pour juice. You're getting it on the counter. Rosa laughed. She's right. You're hopeless. Mutiny, in my own kitchen. Emma giggled and ran to hug Rosa's legs. Are you staying forever? She asked. Please say you're staying forever. Rosa knelt down to Emma's level. How would you feel about that if I stayed forever? I would feel happy. Emma's face was serious in the way only children can be. You make Daddy smile. He didn't smile for a long time after Mommy went away, but now he smiles every day. Rosa glanced up at Alexander, who was watching them with suspiciously bright eyes. "Then I'll stay," Rosa said. "Forever." Emma threw her arms around Rosa's neck. "I love you, Rosa." The words hit Rosa like a wave. She had heard them before from her mother, from her sisters. But this was different. This was a child who had learned not to trust, not to hope, not to love freely. And she was giving that love to Rosa without reservation. "I love you too, sweetheart," Rosa whispered. "So much." Noah toddled in a moment later, still rubbing sleep from his eyes. He saw everyone hugging and immediately demanded to be included, raising his arms until Alexander scooped him up. "Family hug," Emma declared. And so they stood there, the four of them tangled together in the middle of a kitchen that smelled like pancakes and maple syrup and something that felt suspiciously like hope. The days that followed were good ones. Alexander cut his work hours in half. He was present for breakfast every morning and dinner every evening. He took the children to the park on weekends, helped Emma with her homework, taught Noah how to kick a soccer ball without falling over. Rosa became the center around which everything else revolved. She cooked and cleaned, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She read bedtime stories and bandaged scraped knees and mediated the endless negotiations between siblings. And at night, after the children were asleep, she and Alexander would sit together in the study or on the back terrace, talking about everything and nothing, learning each other's histories, sharing fears and hopes and dreams. One evening, about a month after the court case ended, Alexander found Rosa standing in the garden near the rose bushes. She was holding a pair of pruning shears, turning them over in her hands. "I found these in the shed," she said without looking up. "Are they the same ones you used?" "Yes." Alexander walked to stand beside her. "I kept them. I don't know why." "Maybe because they remind you of something." "Of what?" Rosa finally looked at him. "Of who you became when you stripped everything else away. No money, no power, no fancy suits, just a father who loved his children enough to become invisible to save them." Alexander took the shears from her hands. "I was terrified every single day," he admitted. "Terrified I'd be discovered. Terrified I'd miss something important. Terrified I'd watch my children be hurt and not be able to stop it." "But you did stop it. We stopped it. Together." Rosa smiled. Together. They stood there in the garden as the sun set behind them, painting everything gold and rose and amber. The same garden where Alexander had worked for 2 weeks, blistering his hands, breaking his heart, learning what really mattered. "Do you ever think about what would have happened?" Rosa asked quietly. "If you hadn't disguised yourself? If I hadn't been there?" "Every day." Alexander's voice was rough. "I think about Emma growing up afraid. Noah learning that love comes with conditions, both of them becoming smaller and quieter until there was nothing left. But that didn't happen. No. Because you were brave. Because you chose my children over your own safety." Rosa shook her head. "I didn't choose. That implies there was a decision to make. When I saw Miranda raise her hand, my body moved before my brain could catch up. It wasn't courage. It was instinct." "That's what courage is," Alexander said. "Doing the right thing before you have time to talk yourself out of it." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. Rosa couldn't see what it was in the fading light. "I know I said we'd take it slow," Alexander continued, "and I meant it, but I also know that some things don't need time. Some things are just true." He opened his hand. A ring lay in his palm. Not a diamond, not something ostentatious that would make Rosa uncomfortable. Just a simple band of gold with a small sapphire that caught the last rays of sunlight. "It was my grandmother's," Alexander said. "She wore it for 53 years. She always said the secret to a good marriage was finding someone brave enough to stand beside you in the storm. Rosa's breath caught. Alexander, I'm not asking you to marry me. Not yet. I'm asking you to consider it. To wear this ring and think about what kind of life we could build together. You, me, Emma, Noah. A real family. We're already a family. Then let's make it official. Rosa looked at the ring, then at Alexander, then at the mansion behind them, where two children were sleeping peacefully for the first time in months. What about your world? She asked. Your business partners, your social circle. They'll never accept me. I'm a maid, Alexander. I cleaned houses for a living. You protected children for a living. You showed more courage in one moment than most people show in a lifetime. Anyone who can't see that doesn't belong in my life. People will talk. Let them talk. I've spent too many years caring about what people think. It didn't make me happy. It didn't keep my children safe. The only thing that matters now is what we build together. Rosa felt tears prick at her eyes. I never imagined this, she whispered. Any of this. I came to work as a maid. I expected to stay 3 months, maybe 6, just until I saved enough to help my mother with her bills. And instead I found a little girl who needed protection, and a little boy who needed love, and a man who was willing to become invisible to save them. She laughed softly. My father used to say that God works in mysterious ways. I think he'd be laughing right now. Is that a yes? Rosa took the ring from his palm and slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. It's a yes, she said. To considering, to hoping, to building something together. Alexander pulled her into his arms and held her tight. Thank you, he whispered into her hair. For everything. For saving my children. For saving me. You saved yourself, Rosa replied. I just reminded you who you really are. They walked back to the house together as darkness settled over the garden. Through the windows they could see the warm glow of lights, the evidence of life and love and recovery. Emma met them at the door. Rosa, why are you crying? She demanded. Happy tears, sweetheart. Emma considered this. That's a good kind of crying, she decided. Mommy used to do that sometimes, when Daddy did something nice. Rosa knelt down and hugged her tightly. Your mommy sounds like she was very wise. She was, but you're wise too. Emma pulled back and looked at Rosa's hand. Her eyes went wide. Is that a ring? Rosa glanced at Alexander, who nodded. It is. Does that mean you're going to be our new mommy? The question hung in the air. Rosa felt the weight of it, the responsibility, the trust being offered. I could never replace your mommy, she said carefully. No one can. She loved you more than anything in the world, and that love doesn't go away just because she's not here anymore. Then what will you be? Rosa thought about it. I'll be Rosa, she said finally. Someone who loves you and Noah, someone who will always protect you, someone who will be here every day no matter what. Emma nodded solemnly. That's good enough for me. She ran back into the house, shouting for Noah to wake up and see Rosa's new ring. Alexander laughed softly. I think you passed the test. There was a test. There's always a test. Children are better judges of character than adults. They see through the masks we wear. Rosa thought about Miranda, about the careful facade she had maintained, about the cold cruelty hidden behind charming smiles. Not always, she said quietly. No, not always. Alexander took her hand. But this time they got it right. They walked into the house together, ready to face whatever came next. 6 months later, on a Saturday morning in October, Rosa stood in front of a mirror in the master bedroom of the Thornton mansion. The dress she wore was simple ivory silk that brushed her ankles, nothing like the elaborate gowns she had seen in bridal magazines. She had chosen it herself, paid for it with money she had earned, and she loved it precisely because it was hers. Emma appeared in the doorway wearing a pale blue dress with a ribbon in her hair. "You look like a princess," she breathed. Rosa turned and smiled. "You think so? Better than a princess. Princesses are boring. You look like a hero." Rosa laughed and knelt down to adjust Emma's ribbon, which had already come slightly loose. "Heroes don't usually wear white dresses." "Why not?" "You saved us. That makes you a hero." Emma's face was completely serious. "Daddy says heroes come in all shapes and sizes. He says the best ones don't wear capes. They wear aprons and gardener clothes, and they do brave things when nobody's watching." Rosa felt her eyes sting. "Your daddy is a very wise man." "I know. That's why I picked him." "Picked him?" Emma nodded solemnly. "Before I was born, I was up in heaven with Mommy, and we looked down at all the daddies in the world, and I said, 'That one. I want that one.' And Mommy said, 'Okay.'" Rosa didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so she did both. "That's a beautiful story, sweetheart." "It's not a story. It's true." Emma paused. "And I think maybe I picked you too, before you came here. I think I knew you were coming to save us." Rosa pulled her into a tight hug. "I think maybe you did." A knock on the door interrupted them. Alexander's voice came through the wood. "Is the bride ready? We have a wedding to get to." "You're not supposed to see me before the ceremony," Rosa called back. "Technically, the ceremony is in our backyard. I've already seen the backyard approximately 10,000 times." Emma giggled. "He has a point." "Don't take his side." "I'm taking the side of logic." Rosa shook her head in mock despair. "You're 7 years old. You're not supposed to know what logic is." "I'm gifted." Alexander's laughter filtered through the door. "She gets that from me." "She gets her stubbornness from you," Rosa corrected. "The rest is all Catherine." There was a brief silence. Then Alexander's voice came again, softer this time. "Yes, the best parts are all Catherine." Rosa walked to the door and opened it. Alexander stood in the hallway wearing a simple gray suit. No tie, his hair slightly disheveled the way she loved it. Noah squirmed in his arms, trying to grab his father's boutonniere. "You look beautiful," Alexander said. "You're not supposed to see me." "Too late." His eyes traveled over her face, her dress the small bouquet of roses she held. "Rosa, I don't think I've ever seen anything more beautiful in my life." "Daddy," Emma interjected, "you're supposed to say that after the ceremony, during the kiss part." "I'll say it again during the kiss part." "You promise?" "I promise." Noah finally succeeded in grabbing the boutonniere and immediately tried to eat it. Alexander rescued it with practiced ease. "I think someone's hungry." "He's always hungry," Emma observed. "He's like a vacuum cleaner with legs." Rosa laughed and took Noah from Alexander's arms. The boy immediately snuggled against her chest, abandoning his pursuit of the flower in favor of warmth and comfort. "Hello, little one," she murmured. "Are you ready to watch Daddy and Rosa get married?" Noah looked up at her with his big brown eyes. "Mama," he said clearly. Everyone froze. It was the first time he had called her that. He had been saying Rosa for months, or sometimes just Ro when he was tired, but never Mama. Rosa looked at Alexander, her eyes wide. He did. "Alexander, I didn't teach him that. I never asked him to." "I know." Alexander's voice was thick. "He figured it out on his own." Emma tugged at Rosa's dress. Is it okay that he called you Mama? Because Mommy is still our Mommy, but you're our Rosa, and maybe you can be both, like how Daddy is. Daddy, but also Alexander, but also the gardener. Rosa knelt down, still holding Noah so she was at Emma's level. It's more than okay, she said softly. It's perfect. So I can call you Mama too, if I want. Rosa felt something break open in her chest, something that had been locked away for so long she had forgotten it existed. Only if you want to, sweetheart. Only if it feels right. Emma considered this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice weighing a constitutional matter. It feels right, she decided. Mama Rosa, that's what I'll call you, because you're not replacing Mommy. You're adding to her. Alexander wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I think we're all going to need tissues before this wedding even starts. They made their way downstairs together, this family that had been forged in crisis and tempered by love. The backyard had been transformed overnight into something simple and elegant. White chairs arranged in rows, an arch covered in roses, a small string quartet playing something soft and classical. Rosa's mother sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Her sisters were beside her, all three of them crying already. On the other side, Marcus Webb sat with his wife, grinning broadly. David Chen and his wife Jennifer had flown in from Seattle. Even Diane, the silver-haired woman from Miranda's brunch, had come, having reached out to Alexander months ago to apologize for her brief cowardice. There were no photographers, no press, no society columnists, just the people who mattered. Alexander took his place at the altar, while Emma led Rosa down the makeshift aisle, Noah toddling beside them, holding a pillow with rings he didn't entirely understand. The officiant, a kind-faced woman Alexander had known since childhood, smiled as they approached. Friends and family, she began. We are gathered here today to celebrate one of life's greatest gifts, the gift of love found in unexpected places, the gift of family built from courage and sacrifice, the gift of second chances. Rosa felt Alexander's hand find hers. His fingers were warm and steady. Alexander and Rosa came to each other through circumstances that would have broken lesser people. They faced deception and cruelty and the darkest parts of human nature, and they emerged not just intact, but transformed, because they had something that darkness cannot destroy. She paused. They had each other. The ceremony was short, as they had requested. There were no elaborate vows, no poetic flourishes, just simple promises spoken clearly in front of the people they loved. I promise to protect you, Alexander said, as fiercely as you protected my children. I promise to love you, Rosa replied, without condition, without reservation, without end. I promise to be present, to be here, to never again let work or fear or grief pull me away from the people who matter most. I promise to stand beside you in every storm, to remind you who you are when you forget, to make terrible pancakes that you'll pretend to enjoy. Alexander laughed, and the sound rippled through the gathered crowd. I actually do enjoy your pancakes. Liar. Okay, I enjoy watching you make pancakes. The pancakes themselves are objectively terrible. You're not supposed to be honest during your wedding vows. You just asked me to promise to remind you who you are. This is me being honest. Rosa shook her head, laughing through tears. I love you, she said, even though you're impossible. I love you too, especially because you're extraordinary. The officiant cleared her throat gently. I believe this is the part where you exchange rings. Noah stepped forward proudly, holding up the pillow. The rings had somehow survived his journey down the aisle, though the pillow itself was slightly crumpled. Alexander took Rosa's ring and slid it onto her finger. It nested perfectly against her grandmother's sapphire. "With this ring, I give you everything I am, everything I have, everything I will become." Rosa took Alexander's ring and placed it on his hand. Her fingers were trembling. "With this ring, I promise that you will never be alone again. Not in grief, not in fear, not in joy. Whatever comes, we face it together." "By the power vested in me," the officiant said, her voice warm, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Alexander, you may kiss your bride." He pulled her close and kissed her soft and sweet and full of promise. The crowd erupted in applause. Emma cheered loudly. Noah clapped his hands without entirely understanding why. And somewhere Rosa liked to think Catherine was smiling. The reception was held in the garden under strings of lights that began to twinkle as the sun set. Rosa danced with her mother, then with each of her sisters, then with Alexander, while Emma insisted on standing on his feet. "This is not how dancing works," Alexander protested. "This is how dancing works when you're 7, Emma corrected. "I stand corrected." Marcus Webb approached during a break in the music, a glass of champagne in hand. "I have to admit," he said to Alexander, "when you told me your plan 6 months ago, I thought you'd lost your mind. You told me I was insane. Multiple times, in multiple languages. And now—" Marcus looked at Rosa, who was teaching Noah how to spin in circles without falling over. "Now I think you're the sanest person I know. You found something real, Alex, something most people spend their whole lives looking for." "I almost lost it," Alexander said quietly. "If Rosa hadn't been there, but she was. That's the point. The universe has a way of putting the right people in our path when we need them most. We just have to be smart enough to recognize them." Rosa walked over Noah on her hip. "What are you two conspiring about? Your husband's criminal insanity," Marcus said smoothly. "Ah, his best quality. I thought my best quality was my humble nature. You're a billionaire who disguised himself as a gardener to spy on his own wife. Humble is not in your vocabulary. I learned it from Rosa. I taught you how to make pancakes. Humility was not part of the curriculum." Marcus laughed and excused himself to find more champagne. Alexander pulled Rosa close, Noah sandwiched between them. "Are you happy?" he asked softly. "I don't think I've ever been this happy." "Even with the terrible pancakes are part of the charm." Emma appeared at their side, tugging at Rosa's dress. "Mama Rosa, can I ask you something?" "Anything, sweetheart." "When you have babies, will they be my real brother and sister, or stepbrother and stepsister, like you were Daddy's stepwife, but now you're his real wife?" Rosa and Alexander exchanged a look. "If we have babies," Rosa said carefully, "they would be your real brother and sister. But Emma, Noah is already your real brother, even though you have different mommies. Family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up, who loves you, who stays." Emma processed this. "So, we're all real family. We're all real family. Even David the gardener." Alexander crouched down to Emma's level. "David the gardener was always me sweetheart. I was just wearing a costume." "I know, but sometimes I liked him better." "Better than me? He listened more. He didn't look at his phone all the time. And he made really good hedges." Alexander laughed ruefully. "That's fair. I'll try to be more like David. You don't have to wear the beard again. That was scratchy." Noted. The evening wore on. Guests began to leave, offering congratulations and well wishes. Rosa's mother hugged her for a long time, whispering in Spanish. "Your father would be so proud." "I know, Mama. He always said you were special, that you had a brave heart." "I just did what anyone would do." "No, mija, you did what most people are afraid to do. You chose love over safety. You chose children who weren't yours over a job that paid your bills. That's not normal. That's extraordinary." Rosa held her mother tight. "Thank you. For everything. For raising me to be brave." "I didn't raise you to be brave. You were born that way. I just tried not to break it." After the last guest had left, and the catering staff had cleaned up Alexander, and Rosa sat together on the back terrace, watching the stars emerge one by one. Emma and Noah were asleep upstairs, exhausted from the excitement. The house was quiet, in the way only a home can be quiet, filled not with absence, but with presence. "I keep waiting to wake up," Rosa admitted. "From what? From this. From all of it. 6 months ago, I was a maid earning minimum wage, sending half my paycheck to my mother living in a studio apartment with a mattress on the floor. Now I'm sitting in a mansion wearing a wedding ring, married to a billionaire. Does that bother you?" "No. That's what scares me. It feels so natural, like I was always supposed to be here." Alexander took her hand. "Maybe you were. You don't believe in fate. I didn't used to, but then I hired a gardener named David, who turned out to be terrible at gardening, and a maid named Rosa, who turned out to be extraordinary at everything, and a nightmare named Miranda, who turned out to be the catalyst for the best thing that ever happened to me. You think Miranda was a blessing? I think she was a test. And we passed." He paused. "I don't forgive her. I'll never forgive her for what she did to the children. But I can acknowledge that without her cruelty, I might never have seen you clearly. I might have kept going through the motions blind to everything that mattered." Rosa leaned against his shoulder. "What happened to her Miranda?" "She moved to New York. Started over with a new name, a new story. Marcus heard she's dating some Wall Street type, probably running the same playbook. Shouldn't we warn him? We tried. He didn't want to hear it. Some people have to learn for themselves." "That's sad." "It's human." Alexander kissed the top of her head. "All we can do is protect our own family. The rest is out of our hands." They sat in comfortable silence as the night deepened around them. "Rosa." "Yes." "Do you ever think about what you would have done if you hadn't gotten the job here, if someone else had been hired instead?" Rosa considered the question. "I think about it sometimes. I imagine some other woman standing in that kitchen watching Miranda raise her hand, choosing to look away because it was easier. I imagine Emma growing up afraid, Noah learning that love comes with conditions. I imagine you coming home from your fake business trip and finding your children broken in ways that can't be fixed. But that didn't happen. No, because I was there. Because something bigger than both of us put me exactly where I needed to be. God, maybe, or fate, or just dumb luck." She smiled. "Does it matter? The outcome is the same. Your children are safe. We found each other, and we built something beautiful from the wreckage." Alexander pulled her closer. "I love you, Rosa Thornton." "I love you too, Alexander Thornton." She paused. "That sounds weird." "Rosa Thornton? You could keep Martinez." "No, I want to share your name. I want Emma and Noah to introduce me as their mother without having to explain why we have different last names. I want to belong completely and permanently." "You already belong." "I know, but now it's official." They stayed on the terrace until the cold drove them inside. As they climbed the stairs to their bedroom, Rosa paused at Emma's door and pushed it open gently. The little girl was sprawled across her bed, one arm wrapped around a stuffed elephant that had once belonged to Noah, the other clutching the edge of her blanket. She looked peaceful in a way she never had during Miranda's reign. She's dreaming, Alexander whispered. How can you tell? Her fingers are moving. Catherine used to say that meant she was dreaming about playing piano. Does she play piano? Not yet, but maybe someday. Rosa reached out and brushed a strand of hair from Emma's forehead. Sleep well, sweet girl, she murmured. They checked on Noah next, who was sleeping in his crib with his thumb in his mouth and his new elephant tucked under his arm. Rosa had bought it for him the week after Miranda left a replacement for the one that had been thrown away. He had immediately adopted it as his most prized possession. He's getting too big for the crib, Alexander observed. I know. We should transition him to a bed soon. Another milestone. There will be a lot of those. First steps become first words, become first days of school, become first heartbreaks. Rosa smiled. We'll be there for all of them. They walked to the master bedroom hand in hand. Rosa changed out of her wedding dress while Alexander hung his jacket in the closet. They moved around each other with the easy familiarity of people who have learned to share space, to anticipate needs to exist in harmony. As they climbed into bed, Rosa turned to face Alexander. Can I tell you something? Anything. When I was little, my father used to tell me a story about a man who lost everything. His home, his family, his fortune. He wandered the world looking for meaning, looking for purpose. And one day, he found a child crying by the side of the road. He stopped to help even though he had nothing to offer. He gave the child his last piece of bread, his last coin, his last bit of warmth. What happened? The child turned out to be a prince in disguise. He rewarded the man with everything he had lost, and more. A new home, a new family, a new fortune. Alexander smiled. A fairy tale. That's what I always thought. A nice story with no connection to real life. Rosa took his hand. But now I think my father was trying to tell me something. That kindness isn't transactional. That you don't help people because you expect a reward. You help them because it's right. And sometimes if you're very lucky, the universe rewards you anyway. You think I'm your reward. I think we're each other's reward. I think we both wandered through darkness and loss and came out the other side to find each other, waiting. Alexander pulled her close. You're the most remarkable woman I've ever known. You're not so bad yourself. For a billionaire pretending to be a gardener. Former gardener. I've been promoted. To what? Husband, father, pancake assistant. Rosa laughed softly. Those are good titles. The best I've ever had. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, two people who had found home in the most unlikely of places. 1 year later, the Thornton mansion was filled with noise and chaos and joy. Emma, now 8, was practicing piano in the living room. Her fingers stumbling over scales that would eventually become music. Noah, 3½, was building a tower of blocks that defied the laws of physics. Rosa, 7 months pregnant, was trying to cook dinner while simultaneously preventing Noah from eating crayons. And Alexander, former billionaire gardener, was right in the middle of it all. Daddy, listen, Emma called out, launching into a halting rendition of Mary Had a Little Lamb. Beautiful, sweetheart. I messed up the middle part. That's how you learn. Mess up, try again, get better. That's what Mama Rosa says. Mama Rosa is very wise. Rosa waddled into the living room, one hand on her belly. Mama Rosa is also very tired, and wondering why no one told her that pregnancy involves this much heartburn. I could make dinner, Alexander offered. The last time you made dinner, you set off the smoke alarm. That was 1 time. It was 3 times, in the same week. I'm learning. Mess up, try again, get better. Rosa laughed and kissed his cheek. Fine. You can make the salad. Even you can't burn lettuce. Challenge accepted. They sat down to dinner together, the 5 of them crowded around a table meant for 12. Emma talked about school. Noah showed off his ability to count to 10. Rosa and Alexander exchanged glances filled with shared amusement and deeper love. After dinner, while Rosa put Noah to bed, Alexander found Emma on the back terrace, staring up at the stars. "What are you thinking about, sweetheart?" "Mommy." Alexander sat down beside her. "Tell me." "I'm trying to remember her voice, but it's getting harder. I remember what she looked like because of pictures, but her voice..." Emma's lower lip trembled. "I don't want to forget her voice." Alexander pulled his daughter close. "I have something for you. I was saving it for when you were older, but I think maybe now is the right time." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. With a few taps, he opened a file that had been carefully preserved, protected, waiting. Catherine's voice filled the air. "Happy birthday, my beautiful girl. You're 4 years old today, and I can't believe how big you're getting. I love you more than all the stars in the sky, more than all the fish in the sea, more than all the flowers in every garden everywhere. Remember that, Emma. No matter where I am, no matter what happens, I will always, always love you." Emma listened with tears streaming down her face. "Mommy," she whispered. "I recorded it on her phone the year before she got sick. She didn't know I was listening. I've kept it all this time waiting for the right moment. Can I have it? Can I listen to it whenever I want? It's yours, forever." Emma threw her arms around her father. "Thank you, Daddy. Thank you, thank you, thank you." Rosa appeared in the doorway, drawn by the sound of Catherine's voice. She didn't interrupt. She just stood there, watching her husband comfort their daughter, carrying the memory of a woman she had never met, but had come to love through the legacy she left behind. Later that night, after Emma had fallen asleep, clutching Alexander's phone with her mother's voice inside, Rosa found her husband in the garden, standing beside the rose bushes he had planted 8 years ago. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. "More than okay." He turned to face her. "I was just thinking about how strange life is, how the worst moments can lead to the best ones, how losing Catherine nearly destroyed me, but it also led me here. To you. To this. Do you think she would have approved of me?" Alexander smiled. "Catherine would have loved you. She believed in brave hearts and kind souls. She believed in people who show up when it matters, who protect the vulnerable, who choose love over safety." He paused. "She would have seen exactly who you are, and she would have trusted you completely." Rosa placed her hand on her belly where their child was kicking. "I hope I can live up to that." "You already have. Every single day." They stood together in the garden as the moon rose overhead, casting silver light across the roses and the fountain and the path where Alexander had once walked in worn boots and a fake beard, desperate to save his children. He had saved them. And in the process, he had found something he never expected. A second chance. A new beginning. A love that had grown from courage and blossomed into forever. Rosa took his hand. "Come inside. It's cold." "In a minute. I just want to stand here a little longer." "Why?" "Because this is where it all started. This garden, this disguise, this choice to become invisible in order to see clearly." And he looked at her. "And this is where I first realized that you were something special. That day under the oak tree when you told me about the boy you couldn't save, when you said you'd never stay silent again." "I remember." You meant it. You proved it. And because of that, my children are safe. My family is whole. My life is better than I ever imagined it could be." Rosa squeezed his hand. "Our life." "Our life," he agreed. They walked back to the house together, leaving the garden behind. Through the windows they could see the warm glow of home, the evidence of everything they had built from the ashes of heartbreak and betrayal. Emma's piano music drifted out into the night, imperfect but beautiful, a work in progress like everything else. And somewhere in the quiet spaces between notes, between heartbeats, between breaths, the spirit of a woman named Catherine smiled at the family her husband had found the courage to build again. Not a replacement, never a replacement. Something new, something brave, something true. Rosa paused at the door and looked back at Alexander. "Ready?" He smiled the smile of a man who had walked through fire and emerged holding everything that mattered. "Ready." They stepped inside together, closing the door on the past, opening their hearts to the future. And in that moment, in that house, full of love and laughter and second chances, Alexander Thornton finally understood what it meant to be home. Not a place, not a building, not an address. Home was the people who loved you enough to fight for you. Home was the courage to become invisible in order to protect what mattered. Home was a maid who became a hero, a gardener who became a father again, and two broken children who learned to trust because someone refused to look away. Home was this. Home was them. Home was forever.